Well, shalom. My name is Todd Bennett, and this is the weekly audio version of the Shema Yisrael newsletter entitled Waking Up from a Roman Hangover. This was first published on day 16 of month 4 on the Creator's calendar, otherwise known as July 16th, 2022 on the Roman calendar. Over the past couple of weeks, I've focused on the house of Yisrael and the prophecies concerning a return to the covenant land. As I consider those messages, I realize how odd it must sound to people who have come from a Christian background. The thought of actually physically returning to the land through some worldwide exodus is such a foreign concept to most Christians. After all, that land is for the Jewish people, and the church is supposed to go to heaven, right? Well, that's not what the scriptures state. While there are events involving the elect meeting at the throne of Elohim, that doesn't mean they dwell there all the time. In fact, those times that we read about in the text of Revelation, where we read about the multitudes surrounding the throne, are likely appointed times, set apart assemblies when the people of Elohim are called to meet with him. The scriptures repeatedly describe the people of Elohim returning to dwell in the covenant land. And while Yeshua is coming with the renewed Jerusalem, that renewed city will ultimately descend on a renewed earth. So, I'm not just pulling an idea out of a hat, and I'm not speculating about some unknown future prophetic event that is up for debate. The return to the land is a very solid scriptural principle that has been overlooked by most Christians. They miss the importance of this key future event because they've been taught lies which disconnect them from the physical covenant assembly, Yisrael. Now, this is one of the side effects of the Roman takeover of the faith, when the Roman Empire created a syncretistic religion called Christianity. And of course, syncretism means a blending of all sorts of religions and beliefs in order to accommodate new converts and add them to the assembly. And that's what Christianity has done and continues to do. Christianity does not represent the faith of the covenant assembly Yisrael, nor does it accurately represent the teachings or even a name of the Messiah of Yisrael. Christianity has posed as a faith that worships the creator of the universe, yet it is actually a Babylonian religion shrouded in some truth. Those raised within this religious construct are the offspring of Babylon. The scriptures describe them as daughters of Babylon. They have become drunk from the cup of the woman who rides the beast that we read about in Revelation 17. They believed a lie and are practicing lawlessness, which is opposite from the righteous instructions of the Torah. Thankfully, many are waking up from their religious drunken stupor. They understand that they must be daughters of Zion in order to attend the wedding supper of the Lamb, where they can drink the best wine and eat from the table prepared by Elohim. As a result, there are many people currently suffering from what I refer to as a Roman hangover. And I actually think that may be the title of a new book sometime in the future. If you've ever suffered from a hangover, you know that it is essentially the result of poisoning your body with too much of the wrong stuff. An alcoholic keeps imbibing in order to cover the symptoms. The only true cure is to detoxify the body through rest and hydration. I see Christians who go to church 3 to 4 times a week. They get a shot of worship and a chaser of preaching to keep the high going. What they really need is to rest on the Sabbath and detox from all the religion that's coursing through their veins. Those suffering from a Roman hangover need to hydrate with the living waters of the true Messiah, Yeshua. They need to understand that everything is not always spiritual. While there are many spiritual lessons to be learned, if we neglect the physical aspect of this walk, we will find ourselves off the straight path, chasing new doctrines, revelation, and experiences. Let's face it, when you get out of bed in the morning, you put your feet on the ground. We were placed in this physical realm purposefully, and we are expected to live our lives as instructed by the Creator. Sadly, there are many Christians who think their destiny lies in the clouds, and they neglect the basics of the here and now. They want the meat, but they can't even digest the milk of the Torah. Much of the Torah involves very basic instructions for living. We're supposed to master those instructions and learn the lessons built into them. Once we grow fat on the milk, we then can move on to the meat. And that's what Yeshua was teaching during his time here on earth. For instance, by most accounts, the seventh commandment states, "You shall not commit adultery." We read that in Exodus 20:14. Yeshua stated, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So obviously, first and foremost, you should not be committing adultery in the flesh. You then make sure that adultery is not festering in your heart, and you guard your eyes as well so that you are not tempted in the flesh. In fact, we circumcise the flesh of our male children for this very same reason. They carry the mark of the covenant in the flesh so that they remember to remain faithful and true to their Elohim and their wives. And that's why the mark is specifically placed on the male organ. Again, the lesson is to remember that our hearts must be circumcised, but it starts as an outward physical act that actually leaves a mark. Sadly, Christianity has falsely claimed to be spiritual Israel, and in support of that position, the religion asserts that the physical instructions no longer apply to them. So essentially, they get all the blessings of being Israel, but they don't have to none of the responsibility of actually obeying the Torah and living righteous lives. And that's quite a contradiction, and it's actually simply ludicrous. It's a lie straight from the pit. People who believe such a thing are intoxicated. They're drunk with the doctrines of demons. The enemy of mankind wants people to live in rebellion and disobedience so that they will be separated from Elohim. And imagine the irony of incorporating lawlessness into the very religion that claims to worship and serve Elohim. It's diabolically genius. And I say all that in order to drive home the point that the covenant was founded in real blood and etched into actual flesh. And that's why Yeshua had to be born in the flesh and die in the flesh for us. And that's why he continues to bear the marks of death in his renewed body. And as long as we're here in the flesh, we need to keep our heads out of the clouds and focus on our daily walk. When Yeshua comes in the clouds and sends his messengers to gather the elect, well, that's an entirely different matter. For the time being, instead of simply waiting for a rapture, we need to be wise servants. Listen to what Yeshua said. He said, "Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning, and you yourselves be like men who wait for their master when he will return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they may be open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, will find watching. Assuredly, I say to you that he will gird himself and have them sit down to eat, and will come and serve them. And if he should come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Now, do you know when the second and the third watch occur? If not, you may want to learn how to tell time based upon the markers provided through the Torah. The Torah calendar site provides valuable resources and actually shows how to keep track of the watches. Adam was supposed to watch over the garden, and Yisrael was supposed to watch over the promised land. These lands were actual physical places located here on this planet. Yahuwah is currently training up watchmen, a people who will watch over his word and faithfully dwell in his covenant land as covenant people. So they would watch over his land as well. Sadly, most who consider themselves to be watchmen don't even know how to tell time, so they cannot properly keep their appointments. Yahweh still watches over Israel, and nothing has changed regarding the covenant land, except for the fact that soon Yeshua will be in charge. That's why he's referred to as the second Adam and the last Adam. Yeshua is going to restore this planet from the corruption that resulted from the first Adam failing to watch. He will rule from the mountain of Yahweh. Listen to what Isaiah had to say. Now it shall come to pass in the later days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. That's a description of the future, and it focuses on the covenant land. Sadly, most people are currently busy watching over their own kingdoms, thinking that they're going to be whisked away into heaven to sit on a cloud and play a harp. They completely miss the context of the covenant and the plan of Elohim. Yeshua did not come and die so that Christians can live like hell and then go to heaven. He came to redeem a people who will follow him and obey his commandments. He came for a people who are so thankful for his grace and mercy that they express their love through a zeal to obey him and please him. Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. The early followers of Yeshua were all zealous for the Torah, and we read about that in Acts. After the creation of the Christian religion, adherents were taught to reject the Torah, but Yeshua is calling out his sheep. Those lost sheep who hear his voice are understanding the importance of obedience and are now zealous for the Torah as well. These are the people who should take the prophecies concerning the house of Israel seriously, because as I explained last week, we're in the generation when the punishment period over the house of Israel expired. There are also tens of thousands of people around the world waking up from their Roman hangovers. They're leaving the church and detoxing from religion. They're resting on the Sabbath and getting hydrated by the pure living waters promised by Yeshua during the last great day of Sukkot that we read about in John 7:37 through 38. They're repenting and turning back to Yahweh by following his righteous instructions found in the Torah. Is this all coincidence? I don't think so. It's all written in the scriptures that people have had access to for centuries. Yahweh is going to gather a covenant people back to his land in a miraculous fashion. The catch is that the covenant was renewed by Yeshua, the Lamb of Elohim. So you have to be in that covenant. Now remember that the Israelites observed the first Passover under the direction of Moses while in Egypt, after they were circumcised. The covenant was later established at Sinai on Shavuot. The second Passover happened 40 years later under the direction of Joshua, same name as Yeshua. It was done in the land after they were circumcised at Gilgal. The covenant was later renewed by Joshua at Shechem. Now I expect Yeshua will be following these patterns when he returns to conquer the land and establish the covenant on the planet. He's going to rule over this planet from the covenant land. That's a scriptural fact. Nevertheless, the reality of that is sometimes hard for people to process. I think because we grew up in an era of movies that it's difficult to apply the miraculous to our everyday life. While we may agree with prophecies and expect the fact that there is a future fulfillment, we have a hard time actually believing that it will happen to us. Our brains transfer that to the region of imagination and entertainment. So we just go on living business as usual. Well, we can watch movies about Moses and the Israelites leaving Egypt. It's difficult to think that something like that would happen to us. It doesn't fit our paradigm. It's likely the result of the fact that so many of us grew up hearing about the rapture. We were taught that we'll just be caught up into heaven in the blink of an eye, and there's no real work involved in the process. We often forget that Israel had to slaughter the Passover lamb, pack up and get ready to leave, travel for many miles, and then literally go camping for 40 years. Now, their camping trip was not supposed to last 40 years. It got extended because they weren't mentally and spiritually ready for the physical challenges that they confronted, like hunger, thirst, giants, etc. This would be hard for many people to accept as a new reality after living in Egypt for so long, even for slaves. Likewise, it may be difficult for a bunch of comfortable Babylonian slaves, if you get my drift. In fact, I don't know what would be harder for people today, the mental or the physical challenges that lie ahead. People are so used to being comfortable and having their taste buds tantalized with every meal. Sleeping without a memory foam mattress and a steady, bland diet would surely cause many to grumble and melt down. It's easy to criticize the Israelites who left Egypt, but I suspect many today who consider themselves to be the bride of Christ would fail those same tests. Let's face it, how would you fare if your water turned to blood, followed by frogs and gnats all around you? Those are the first 3 plagues that the Israelites experienced, along with the Egyptians. That alone would be pretty traumatic for people nowadays. And how about if you then witnessed the people around you being plagued, and then all their firstborn were killed, and then you were told to leave everything, only to be trapped by Pharaoh and his army? Would you have unwavering faith all the way? Or would you be complaining and saying, what kind of plan is this? What's going on? This seems to be always, coming up with problems, and it doesn't seem like it's going smoothly. This can't be God. Well, what if you were finally delivered from Pharaoh, but then suffered thirst and hunger? Would you question things and wonder again, is this really God's will? I know people who think that everything has to go flawlessly if you're being led by Elohim and his spirit. The second there's a snag or an inconvenience, they question things. They fail to understand that Yahuwah tests his people. If you're about to enter into the promised land, we're told that it was filled with man-eating giants. Would you question the wisdom of proceeding forward? Surely Elohim wouldn't take us to a place where our children are in danger, right? Well, I can assure you that there will be apparent obstacles on the horizon if you go the distance with Elohim. The only question is whether you believe that Yahuwah can move them or not. And I'm not spiritualizing any of this at the moment. I'm talking about physical obstacles. Are you ready to follow a pillar of smoke and fire, even when it seems like you're going in the wrong direction? The problem that I see is that many in Western society have become blinded and paralyzed by their wealth. Even people considered to be lower class live lives of luxury compared to people in the past. Electricity, indoor plumbing, refrigeration, hot water on demand. I could go on and on concerning luxuries that even the greatest kings and queens and emperors of the past did not have. So, comparatively speaking, people in this modern era live very lavish lives. Along with that comes the enormous entertainment industry that inundates people's senses, which, as stated, has the tendency to detach people from reality. I see many people start out zealous for the Torah only to be swallowed up by the trap of achieving success and acquiring wealth, and they get lulled into complacency. That brings to mind a group of followers of Yeshua in Asia Minor, located in the city of Laodicea. It's generally understood that Laodicea was a banking and financial center, which meant it was quite wealthy. In fact, when an earthquake destroyed parts of the city in 61 CE, it refused aid from Rome and used its own resources to rebuild. It also had a large fashion and clothing industry. The sheep in the area were noted for their soft, violet-black, glossy wool. Laodicea also had a famous medical center, noted for its treatments of the eyes and ears. Wealth, clothing, medicine centers, health and healing, medical industry. Does any of this sound familiar? Interestingly, the water supply for the city came from hot mineral springs about 5 miles away. By the time the water reached the city, it was only lukewarm. Even though some in Laodicea followed Yeshua and kept the Torah, they still were influenced by their surroundings. As a result, here's the message that Yeshua had for them. And to the messenger of the assembly of the Laodiceans, write, these things says the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of Elohim. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. So, this is a real place, and Yeshua was giving very specific advice based upon real life experiences. These people were rich, but their water was lukewarm, as was their walk and their works. They took comfort in all of their wealth and didn't have a zeal for Yahuwah because they had everything they thought they needed. They had material wealth, but spiritually they were poor, naked, blind. They were being influenced by their surroundings, as are most American Christians today. The wealth that you're experiencing today is not necessarily normal or good for you, even though that is what society is telling you. I'll never forget the first time I traveled to Africa. When I arrived in Nigeria, I found countless churches trying to imitate Western Christianity. The pastors wore slick clothing, while those attending the services tried to compete. Most couldn't because they were so poor. The pastors were shouting and sweating as they belted out their sermons. None of them that I saw taught the Torah, only a warped prosperity gospel that they inherited from American Christianity. My heart was sick as I realized the impact that Western religion had on these people. This was not the message of Yeshua. This was the religion of Rome, as promoted by a bunch of Laodicean Christians on another continent. Prosperity is not the goal of our walk with Elohim, neither is our comfort. As I explained last week, I'm packing up our home of 25 years, and I have to admit that I'm disturbed at all the stuff that we have accumulated. It's mostly junk, and it's really ridiculous. In the midst of the process, a former Russian client of mine named Alex has been bringing people from his community to help us move and clean up. Most of them attend services at the nearby Russian Orthodox monastery. And this past week, Alex brought a monk named Vladimir with him. I have to tell you that Vlad looks like someone from the past, with his uncut hair and a long, scraggy beard. He's an ascetic, and if you put him in a robe, you would probably confuse him with the likes of Ezekiel or Isaiah. He's a skinny guy who barely eats, wears the same clothes every day, and won't take money. He just shows up to serve and help out. He shared with me that he had a vision of the downfall of America many years ago, and that is what brought him to America. He considers himself to be a missionary to America, and he is here to warn people. I find that to be very interesting, considering the times that we're in. He's a poor, meek, and humble servant, which reminds me of some attributes that Yeshua described in Matthew 5. And Yah surely works in mysterious ways. I never thought I'd have an Orthodox missionary monk helping me move out of my home. And this all brings to mind the advice that Yeshua had for the rich man. He says, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. If you want to be perfect, sell all your stuff. Wow, that's a message it's not a message preached in many prosperity churches in America, unless, of course, the pastor happens to be preaching about tithing. That's the one time they will attempt to teach the Torah. The question is whether the advice Yeshua gave is applicable to everyone, or just to that particular rich man. Well, the answer is simple. If your stuff is making you lukewarm and unable to follow Yahushua wholeheartedly, it applies to you. I know a lot of wealthy people. Most take comfort in the wealth they've accumulated. I'm not sure many of them could or would willingly give up that wealth. It's the symbol of their success. They find their identity in it, and their wealth is what they rely on for their comfort, security, and provision. Of course, all of this is vanity and an illusion. The dollar could crash and they could lose everything in one day, and some of them might. What will they do then? Where will they turn? That's exactly why Yahuwah brought his people into the wilderness. They needed to learn to trust him for their daily bread and water, all of their physical needs. I think we all probably need to learn this lesson as well. How many of us pray, "Give us this day our daily bread," with full refrigerators and pantries? Have you ever prayed that prayer not knowing where your next meal will come from? Probably not. So what do? Do we get ready for the days ahead? How do we get ready for the days ahead? Do we sell everything? Do we prep and hunker down with enough food for 7 years? Do we build bomb shelters? Well, not if we expect miracles and a return to the land. While wisdom calls for prudence and preparation, in my opinion, we should be following the example of Daniel when he was facing the completion of the Babylonian exile. Let's take a look at what he did. Then I set my face toward Adonai Elohim to make requests by prayer and supplications with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. I prayed to Yahuwah my Elohim and made confession and said, "O Adonai, great and awesome Elohim, who keeps his covenant and mercy with those who love him and with those who keep his commandments. We have sinned and committed iniquity. We have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing from your precepts and your judgments. Neither have we heeded your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes, to our fathers and all the people of the land. O Adonai, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face, as it is this day, to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and all Israel, those near and those far off, in all the countries of which you have driven them, because of the unfaithfulness which they have committed against you, O Adonai. To us belongs shame of face, to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To Adonai, our Elohim, belong mercy and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. We have not obeyed the voice of Yahuwah, our Elohim, to walk in his Torot, which he set before us by his servants, the prophets. Yes, all Israel has transgressed your Torah and has departed so as not to obey your voice. Therefore, the curse and the oath written in the Torah of Moses, the servant of Elohim, have been poured out on us because we have sinned against him. And he has confirmed his words which he spoke against us and against our judges who judged us, by bringing us a great disaster, for under the whole heaven such has never been done as what has been done to Jerusalem. As it is written in the Torah of Moses, all this disaster has come upon us, yet we have not made our prayer before Yahuwah our Elohim, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand your truth. Therefore Yahuwah has kept the disaster in mind and brought it upon us, for Yahuwah our Elohim is righteous in all the works which he does, though we have not obeyed his voice. And now, O Adonai our Elohim, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and made yourself a name, as it is this day, we have sinned, we have done wickedly. O Adonai, according to all your righteousness, I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city Jerusalem, your set-apart mountain, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people are a reproach to all those around us. Now therefore, our Elohim, hear the prayer of your servant and his supplications, and for Adonai's sake cause your face to shine on your sanctuary, which is desolate. O my Elohim, incline your ear and hear, open your eyes and see our desolations, and the city which is called by your name, for we do not present our supplications before you because of our righteous deeds, but because of your great mercies. O Adonai, hear. O Adonai, forgive. O Adonai, listen and act. Do not delay. For your own sake, my Elohim, for your city and your people are called by your name. Now, while I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before Yahweh my Elohim for the holy set-apart mountain of my Elohim. Yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in a vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come for to give you skill to understand. What a prayer. It was clearly a prayer that Yahweh heard and approved of because he sent Gabriel for an answer. Of course, this was the right prayer at the right time. Daniel had determined that the 70-year punishment over the house of Judah had expired. Yah then sent the messenger Gabriel to provide information concerning 70 weeks that would include the rebuilding of the Jerusalem and the temple, as well as the appearance of the Messiah. Yah sent the messenger to provide guidance for the next phase of his plan. The return of the house of Judah triggered the countdown to the Messiah. Now, last week I talked about how the punishment period for the house of Israel has ended. That's a critical event leading up to the return of the Messiah. As a result, those lost sheep of the house of Israel should be praying as Daniel prayed. They should be repenting and calling upon Yah for his deliverance and for his righteousness. They should be waiting for a messenger and listening for the call to come home. Remember last week how I quoted Jeremiah? It says, Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, that it shall no more be said, Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. But Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he driven them. For I will bring them back into their land, which I gave to their fathers. The reason why they will no longer be talking about the exodus from Egypt is because it will pale in comparison to the regathering from the entire world. That event will be amazing and unprecedented. And Joshua was not the only prophet to talk about it. Remember Hosea? And here's what Isaiah had to say about the second exodus from the nations. It says, It shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, and from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath and the islands of the sea. He will set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Also the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim, but they shall fly down upon the shoulder. Excuse me. They shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines toward the west. Together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall lay their hand on Edom and Moab, and the people of Ammon shall obey them. Yahweh shall utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt with his mighty wind. He will shake his fist over the river and strike it in the seven streams and make men cross over dry shed. Therefore, there will be a highway for the remnant of his people who will be left from Assyria, as it was from Israel, for Israel during the day when he came from the land of Egypt. So, his people who are left from Assyria, again, the house of Israel was taken captive by the Assyrians. So he's talking about the remnant of these people from the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They're going to come back as it was for Israel in the day that he came up from the land of Egypt. Again, so we're reading about a return, and the comparison with the exodus from Egypt cannot be ignored. And we're still remembering the exodus from Egypt at Passover, so obviously this event has not occurred yet. So we should be waiting with zeal and expectation for this great homecoming. Are you ready for it? The reality of this future and our ability to prepare is part of our recovery from the Roman hangover. Make sure you get lots of rest and drink plenty of water. Barakot, my name is Todd Bennett from ShemaIsrael.net.